When my husband David walked through our front door on a rainy Tuesday evening with a woman half my age clinging to his arm, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He looked directly into my eyes and said, "Claire, meet Vanessa. We're in love, and it's time you pack your things." He thought he had planned the perfect ambush, bringing his mistress into our family living room to intimidate me into a quick, humiliating exit. But David had forgotten one crucial detail. Our 8-year-old son, Toby, was standing quietly at the top of the stairs, holding an old leather journal in his small hands. What Toby said next didn't just freeze David and his mistress in their tracks. It completely destroyed the web of lies David had spent the last 3 years spinning. Welcome back to BT Revenge Tales, where betrayal meets its match. Here's my story. My name is Claire, I am 34 years old, and for 9 years, I believed that marriage was built on quiet sacrifice. While David chased his dream of running a boutique marketing agency, I worked 80-hour weeks as a freelance landscape architect, pouring every single commission check into his business accounts to keep his payroll afloat. I drove an 11-year-old sedan, wore secondhand coats, and managed our household, so he could play the high-flying executive. Now, standing in our foyer on that rainy Tuesday evening, David looked at me like I was an unwanted tenant. Vanessa, a 23-year-old intern from his firm, stepped further into our living room, casually taking off her designer coat and draping it over my antique armchair. David didn't hesitate. He pulled a thick manila folder from his leather briefcase and tossed it onto the glass coffee table between us. It slapped against the surface with a cold, final thud. "Sign the uncontested separation papers tonight, Claire," he said, his voice completely devoid of warmth. "You pack 2 bags, take the guest room for tonight, and leave by noon tomorrow." Vanessa smirked, letting her eyes wander around the living room with open disdain. She ran a French manicured hand along the oak mantel, lingering near the framed photos of our family vacations before turning back to me with a condescending smile. "Honestly, Claire, it's a kindness," she purred, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. "You've turned into a boring homebody while David needs a real partner who matches his lifestyle. Don't worry about the master bedroom. I already bought new Egyptian cotton sheets to replace yours tonight." David folded his arms across his chest, stepping forward to back her up. His jaw was set, arrogant and completely unyielding. "Don't bother fighting this, Claire," he warned, leaning in close. "You contributed nothing of value to this life. My agency is the only reason we have anything, and my lawyers will drag you through hell if you contest a single clause. If you refuse to sign right now, I will file for full custody of Toby, paint you as an unfit, emotionally unstable mother, and leave you with absolutely nothing." I stared directly into his eyes, holding my ground in stone-cold silence. Before David could reach for the pen, the faint creak of floorboards broke the heavy silence. We all looked up toward the landing. Our 8-year-old son, Toby, was standing in his dinosaur pajamas at the top of the staircase, clutching a thick, worn leather binder against his chest. His small face looked confused rather than scared. Slowly, Toby descended the stairs, his bare feet making soft padding sounds against the polished hardwood. He stopped at the bottom step and looked directly at David, then glanced at the young woman standing near our fireplace. "Dad." Toby's voice was clear, carrying an innocent weight that made the entire room freeze. "Why is Aunt Vanessa moving in here with her bags? Last Thursday on the kitchen speakerphone, you told Aunt Sarah from accounting that she was the only one you loved. You promised her she'd move into Mommy's room as soon as her father approved the agency's second loan." Toby opened the binder, pointing to neat rows of handwritten notes. "You told me to write down your schedule in your secret office ledger. You saw Aunt Sarah on Friday, Aunt Vanessa on Saturday, and promised both of them the exact same house." The silence that followed Toby's words was absolute, thick enough to suffocate the room. David's face drained of every ounce of color, turning an ashen, sickly gray. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Vanessa whipped around, her arrogant smirk vanishing into instant, venomous fury. "What did your kid just say?" she shrieked, taking an aggressive step toward David. Sarah from accounting? My father gave you $300,000 of angel investment money because you swore I was the only woman in your life. You swore we were building a future together. David frantically threw his hands up, stammering and backing toward the wall. Vanessa, baby, listen to me. Toby's just an 8-year-old kid making up stories. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He just read your exact travel dates and business phone logs, David. Vanessa yelled, tears of humiliation and rage smudging her mascara. Sarah's dad is on the regional banking committee. You used my family's money to woo her for a second corporate line of credit. You're a disgusting, broke fraud. The united front that walked into my home minutes ago was now tearing itself apart, completely blind to the fact that their nightmare had only just begun. As their screaming echoed through the foyer, I calmly walked over to the mahogany desk by the window, opened the top drawer, and pulled out 2 crisp, blue-bound legal files. I walked back into the center of the living room, completely unfazed by their meltdown. You're right about one thing, Vanessa, I said, my voice steady and commanding enough to cut right through her shouting. David is a complete fraud. But you're both terribly mistaken about who actually holds the power in this house. I dropped the heavy files onto the glass table, right on top of David's worthless separation paperwork. First of all, David, this 4-bedroom colonial house is not marital property. It was willed directly to me by my grandfather 3 years before we even met. The deed is exclusively under my maiden name. David stared at the land registry documents, his chest heaving in panicked disbelief. Second, I continued, pointing to the second binder, I hired a forensic accountant 2 months ago. These files contain 500 pages documenting your illegal transfers of marital funds, offshore credit cards, and corporate embezzlement from your investors' trust accounts. My attorney filed for an emergency asset freeze at 4 o'clock today, along with this formal 24-hour eviction notice. Vanessa didn't wait around for another word. She grabbed her designer coat from my armchair, snatched her matching luggage from the entryway, and glared at David with raw hatred. My father's legal team will tear your agency apart by tomorrow morning, David. Enjoy sleeping on the street, she spat, slamming the heavy front door so hard the glass side lights vibrated. David stood frozen in the foyer, the cold reality crashing down on him like an avalanche. His threats of taking custody and leaving me with nothing were now utterly useless. His company was bankrupt, his investor ties were severed, and he had no legal right to step beyond my front porch. Claire, please, he stammered, dropping to his knees near the coffee table, his arrogance completely shattered. Think about our family. We can work through this. Don't throw 9 years away. You threw 9 years away the moment you brought your lies into Toby's home. I replied with pure ice in my voice. I picked up his leather briefcase, stepped over to the entryway, and pulled the front door wide open into the pouring rain. Take your things, David. The police are already dispatched for trespassing if you're not past my gate in 2 minutes. 6 months later, the dust finally settled, leaving behind a life that was lighter, cleaner, and completely mine. The divorce was finalized with zero room for debate. Backed by undeniable forensic records, the judge awarded me full legal custody of Toby and ordered David to repay over $100,000 in misappropriated marital funds. David's marketing firm collapsed within weeks after Vanessa's family and their investor network pulled out their capital and filed joint fraud lawsuits against him. Stripped of his high society illusions, he was forced to move into a rundown studio apartment across town, working an entry-level sales desk just to cover his mounting legal debts. Meanwhile, my boutique landscape architecture practice flourished. I redesigned our garden into a vibrant sanctuary of blooming hydrangeas and stone pathways where Toby safely plays soccer every afternoon. Sitting on our sunlit porch, watching my son laugh under the clear blue sky, I realized that true strength doesn't shout or intimidate. It waits patiently, gathers the truth, and lets the house of cards collapse all on its own.